If you ask the average person what controls the world, they'll probably point to the politicians in Washington, the Federal Reserve, or maybe some tech billionaire in a turtleneck. But they're all looking at the wrong lever. The system quietly running the world, controlling everything from the price of your groceries to energy and government policies onto the banking system. It's not the stock market, and it's certainly not the Illuminati. It's the petrodollar. For over 50 years, this invisible financial matrix has been shaping our world. Yet nobody talks about it because it sounds like a dusty macroeconomics lecture. But to understand the petrodollar, you first have to understand why oil is the ultimate global trump card. We tend to think of oil just as the overpriced liquid we pump into our cars, planes, and ships to transport people and goods around the globe. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. The truth is, our entire modern economy is completely addicted to oil for basically everything. We use it to make plastics, and in some countries, to produce electricity. We even use it to manufacture chemicals, fertilizers, and almost every everyday product you touch. Because oil is the literal lifeblood of human civilization, countries are constantly buying and selling it. You have the massive producers, like Saudi Arabia, sitting on oceans of the stuff, and then you have the heavy users who need a ton of it, but produce almost nothing, like Japan. This extreme imbalance creates a massive, chaotic global oil market. But here is the multi-trillion-dollar question. How did the United States dollar, a piece of paper printed by a government currently running massive deficits, come to completely monopolize and control this global energy market? To answer that, we have to rewind the clock. To understand how the dollar hijacked the globe, we have to rewind to World War II. At the end of the war, while most of the world was basically a smoking crater lying in ruins, the United States emerged like the only guy at the poker table who didn't lose his shirt, keeping its economy and manufacturing base completely intact. This massive leverage led to a little get-together called the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944, where countries agreed to make the US dollar the center of the global financial system. This was a new world order backed by the US dollar. And to get everyone to sign on the dotted line, the US made a massive promise. Their dollars could be directly exchanged for actual physical gold. It was the ultimate financial superglue. So other countries happily tied their own currencies to the dollar. But here's the thing about governments eventually. The printing press becomes too tempting. By 1971, President Nixon delivered what became known as the Nixon shock. He completely decoupled the US economy from the gold standard. Overnight, he transitioned the entire world into a fiat currency economy, violently ripping up the gold-backed contract. If you're not familiar with the term, a fiat currency is simply government-issued money that isn't backed by a tangible physical commodity like gold or silver. Instead, it magically gets its value from public trust and economic stability. Given how the government spends money today, like a bachelor party at 2 a.m. in Miami, relying on their stability sounds like a dark comedy. Now, logically, you'd think breaking the gold promise would make everyone dump the dollar. But after the US stopped backing dollars with gold, the currency stayed dominant. Why? Because the US economy was a massive juggernaut, and at the time, the US government was considered to be highly stable. Plus, the rest of the world was already hooked. So many global transactions were already being done in dollars that it officially cemented its status as the world's reserve currency. This meant countries had no choice but to hold large amounts of it in their central banks just to keep their own economies functioning. But simply being the reserve currency wasn't enough to guarantee eternal global supremacy. To really lock the world into a financial chokehold, the US needed a new kind of gold. And they found it 2 years later, buried deep in the desert. Enter 1973, the year the global economy had a massive reality check. The world experienced the OPEC oil crisis. Arab oil-producing countries essentially turned off the tap, stopping oil sales to countries supporting Israel in the Yom Kippur War, including the United States, just to gain some serious political leverage. The result? Oil prices quadrupled. Imagine waking up tomorrow and your gas bill, your grocery bill, and your electricity bill all instantly go up 400%. That led to massive shortages and severe inflation that absolutely gutted Western economies. The US government quickly realized they had a fatal vulnerability. So, they did what any superpower does when backed into a corner. They made a deal. And not just any deal, a major structural agreement with Saudi Arabia, the undisputed heavyweight champion of oil producers. The terms were beautifully simple. Like a mafia offer, you literally can't refuse. Saudi Arabia would price and sell its oil exclusively in US dollars. In exchange, the US would provide military protection and weapons. It was the ultimate geopolitical protection racket. And since Saudi Arabia was the biggest kid on the playground, the rest of the major oil-producing countries soon had to fall in line and do the exact same thing. Just like that, the petrodollar system was born. This meant if you wanted to buy oil from most major producers, no matter where you were in the world, you couldn't use euros, you couldn't use yen, and you couldn't use gold. You needed US dollars. Let's do the math on why this is so diabolical. Every country on the planet needs oil to survive. If oil is only sold in dollars, then by default, every single country needs a massive pile of US dollars. Let's say you're a country like Japan. You don't pump much of your own oil, but you desperately need it to keep your factories and economy running. Step 1, you must get US dollars. Step 2, you have to keep massive dollar reserves just sitting there ready to go. Step 3, you are forced to trade with the US or hold US assets just to keep that dollar pipeline flowing. This creates a permanent, artificial, and constant global demand for the US dollar. It's the ultimate macroeconomic cheat code. It keeps the dollar artificially strong because everyone is forced to buy it. It allows the US government to blow through cash and borrow money effortlessly at much lower interest rates because the rest of the world is legally mandated to hold their debt. Oh, and as a bonus, it gives the US the power to weaponize the financial system, using sanctions to crush other nations because so many international transactions have to clear through US banks. In simple terms, the petrodollar is the duct tape keeping the US dollar at the absolute center of the world economy. But it gets wilder. What do you think happens to all those billions of dollars the oil-producing countries receive? They don't just stuff piles of cash under a mattress in the desert. They invest it right back into the Wall Street casino. This is a neat little trick called petrodollar recycling. These oil-rich nations take their dollar profits and buy US government bonds, scoop up American companies, and dump cash into US real estate and global markets. The money flows right back into the US financial system. It becomes a flawless, closed-loop system. First, countries buy oil with dollars. Second, oil producers earn those dollars. Third, those producers invest the dollars right back into US assets. And fourthly, the dollar stays incredibly strong, funding American deficits. It's a brilliant scam. But here's the problem with brilliant scams. Eventually, the people getting played wake up and decide they want what happens when the rest of the world finally gets tired of funding Washington's reckless spending sprees. You get a financial recent years, countries like Russia, Venezuela, India, and Pakistan have looked at this petrodollar matrix and decided they want out. They've started actively trying to trade oil in other currencies, like the euro or the Chinese yuan. This anti-dollar movement is essentially the foundational goal of the BRICS trade alliance, partnership of nations whose main objective is to reduce global dependence on the US dollar. But here is the million-dollar question. If these countries are openly hostile to the United States and absolutely hate being at the mercy of its financial system, why on earth are they still trading their most valuable asset in US dollars? Because escaping the petrodollar isn't as simple as just flipping a switch. The system is built like a macroeconomic roach motel. It's incredibly easy to get your money in, but devastatingly painful to pull it out. If a country suddenly decides to switch currencies, they aren't just changing a payment method. They are violently disrupting decades of complex contracts, deeply entrenched hedging systems, global insurance policies, and intricate pricing models. The US dollar possesses what Wall Street loves to call high liquidity. In plain English, that means you can move billions of dollars across the globe in an instant without completely crashing the market. It also comes with strong legal protections that other currencies simply can't guarantee yet. Think of it like this. Moving away from the petrodollar is exactly like when Facebook tried to introduce threads to kill Twitter. Sure, people constantly complain about Twitter, but it's nearly impossible to suddenly convince everyone to move to a brand new platform when the entire global conversation is already happening on Twitter. The US dollar is the Twitter of global finance, toxic, bloated, and frustrating. But everyone is stuck using it because that's where the liquidity is. But that doesn't mean the foundation isn't beginning to fracture. China and Russia are playing a much longer, quieter game, selectively reducing their reliance on the dollar. Recently, Russia has aggressively increased its oil trade with China using the yuan. They've even settled transactions in rubles and quietly dumped their U.S. Treasury holdings. Meanwhile, China is actively provoking yuan-denominated oil contracts and heavily pressuring its trading partners to settle their bills in yuan. But don't mistake this for an overnight collapse of the American financial empire. Here is the key takeaway. These nations are reducing their dollar use strictly where it is politically necessary, especially to dodge the weaponization of U.S. sanctions while happily still using the dollar when it's convenient and efficient for their own bottom line. It's a gradual, calculated shift, not a sudden, bloody revolution. But the cracks in the dam are officially forming, and China's strategy to destabilize the dollar doesn't just stop with the petrodollar system. They are quietly weaponizing a completely different ancient market to break the global financial grip of the US dollar, causing prices to surge to unprecedented levels. So, let's talk about that shiny rock. If you look at a chart of gold recently, it's going straight up, not in a healthy markets, doing market things kind of way, but in a someone chugged a Four Loko and listened to a David Goggins podcast at 3 o'clock a.m. kind of way. Historically, gold is a boring asset class. But suddenly, it's putting up Wilt Chamberlain numbers. Mainstream financial media will spoon-feed you the classic excuse: it's just inflation. But if gold was only reacting to inflation, it would have exploded back in 2021 when the CPI was doing its best impression of a meme coin. It didn't. So, what is actually happening underneath the surface? It's the ultimate blame the system reality check. Foreign countries are quietly losing faith in the US dollar. And when I say quietly, I mean the same way someone quietly deletes all their couple photos on Instagram before announcing a breakup. Over 2 decades ago, central banks held over 70% of their foreign exchange reserves in the US dollar. Today, that share is down to 58%. They aren't aggressively dumping the dollar because that would trigger a global panic attack. Instead, they are diversifying, and their side piece of choice isn't the euro or the yen, it's gold. For the 3rd year in a row, central banks have bought over 1,000 tons of gold per year, making 2024 the highest gold buying year in history. They are doing this because they look at the United States and see a structural fracture. They see a government blowing through cash, spending $1 trillion a year strictly just to service the interest on its $38 trillion national debt. They see an American public quietly drowning in a record $18.6 trillion of household debt, financing their day-to-day survival on buy now, pay later installment plans just to keep the lights on. But here's the part that makes it truly confusing: the cognitive dissonance of our current financial matrix. While sovereign nations are aggressively hedging against a dollar crisis, Wall Street is throwing a frat party. The U.S. stock market is near all-time highs, propped up almost entirely by the Magnificent Seven tech giants, which now make up roughly 36% of the S&P 500. Retail investors are pouring their life savings into companies trading at 50 or even 247 times earnings, treating them like one decision: bulletproof investments. It's a beautifully terrifying echo of the 1970s. Nifty 50 bubble. Everyone is acting like gravity no longer applies to Wall Street. We are living in a world where stocks are priced for an AI-powered utopia, but gold is priced for a troubling systemic breakdown. Both cannot be run. When the people running the global financial system, the central banks, are quietly repositioning and hoarding physical assets, you need to pay attention. They are building their golden parachutes while selling you the narrative that this time it's different. So, what is the actionable move for the ordinary investor who sees through the smoke and mirrors? You stop playing their rigged game on their terms. When the fiat system is suffocating on its own money printing, you look for the exits. You start anchoring your portfolio in reality. That means hard assets, physical commodities, wealth that cannot be inflated away, digitally printed, or frozen by a politician pressing a button. It doesn't mean you go all-in on canned beans and silver coins in a bunker. But it does mean you recognize that the cheapest source of global liquidity is drying up, and the dollar's absolute monopoly is fracturing. The system isn't going to collapse tomorrow, but the duct tape is peeling. The smart money is already stepping out the back door. Do you want to be the last one left in the burning building, holding a bag of overpriced tech stocks and a fistful of depreciating fiat? Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.